Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to talk all about Anthony Edwards' shot selection. What has changed the most since last year? And it might not be what you think when we break down his shot profile. Also, the Timberwolves as a team, why their offense is a little bit less efficient overall than it was at this point last season. We'll break it all down. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. The Timberwolves do not play again until Friday night because of the ongoing NBA Cup. Some good games Tuesday night in the league. But that means we get plenty of time here to reset, to talk about where the Wolves are at roughly just past the quarter pole in the season. Today, I want to focus on the offense. I want to focus specifically on Anthony Edwards to start the show and why overall his offensive production is pretty in line with last year. Through the first, we'll say with where last year ended. Now with the Wolves, 23 games through, or 23 games into the season. But why the shot profile looks different, I'd be willing to bet it's different in a different way than many folks would expect. So we'll talk about that. We'll also have a similar conversation about the team as a whole. Tomorrow on the show, I do want to dig into some big man pairings. I want to talk about the the Rudy Randle pairing and the Rudy Nas pairing and the Randle Nas pairing. Compare some of that to the big man pairings from last year. So we'll do that on tomorrow's show. Lots of stuff to get through here this week as we gear up for the Wolves back in action Friday night against Lakers. So all that's upcoming here over the next couple of days. A big thank you here off the top of today's show for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a quick reminder about the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter, which you can subscribe for at LockedOnDaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Again, LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right. I want to start with Anthony Edwards because it's obviously well documented. It's not a surprise. If you're listening to this podcast, you undoubtedly know that Anthony Edwards is shooting a lot more threes than he's ever shot before, and he's making a lot more threes than he's ever shot before in his career. Last year, he was under 7 threes per game, 6.7 threes per game. This year, he's at 10.5 three-pointers per game, nearly 4 more per game. League-wide right now, in terms of overall league leaders, three-point makes, three-point attempts, Anthony Edwards is, I'm going to pull the exact, he is still number one in made three-point field goals. He's got 11 more made three-point field goals than the next most, which is Malik Beasley and Tyler Hero, tied for second for made three-point shots. As of entry play on Tuesday, and I guess also the case now on Wednesday, Jason Tatum has attempted one more three-pointer than Anthony Edwards and has attempted the second most threes in the league, just one behind Tatum, but he's made the most by 11 because he's shooting a crazy percentage. Anthony Edwards is shooting 42.7% from outside the arc. His previous career high was a shade under 37%, or another way of looking at that is nearly 6 points lower, and that was 2 seasons ago. For his career coming into this season, over 4 years, Anthony Edwards was a 30, for some reason this isn't loading, but like right around 35% three-point shooter. And he's almost 43% this season on a massive volume of attempts, okay? So that's well documented. So that's not surprising to anybody. So where has he taken less shots? Well, certainly he's taken less shots at the rim. And if I had started there and I'd said, well, Ant's not shooting, he's not making enough shots at the rim. He's not attempting enough shots at the rim. He's not getting to the free throw line, which is all part of that problem or a related problem. It's not because he's shooting more mid-range shots. It's because he's shooting more threes. In fact, he's actually also shooting less mid-range shots this year than he did last year. It's not a surprise he's shooting more threes, and it's not a surprise he's shooting less at the rim, but it's come at the expense of, or the shots at the rim have come at the expense of three-point shots, not necessarily because he's shooting more mid-range jumpers, which I found to be pretty interesting. So what we could do is we could go through and look at both his shot selection and then also like how often is he getting to the line, et cetera. So we can start with shot selection. Anthony Edwards last season attempted 31% of his shot attempts at the rim, according to Cleaning the Glass, which is now, depending where you look. So Basketball Reference defines it as 0 to 3 feet from the rim. Cleaning the Glass defines it as within 4 feet of the basket. I'm using Cleaning the Glass for most of this. Ant shot 31% of his shots last year at the rim. Okay. This season, right now, through 23 games, he's only shooting 23% of his shots at the rim. Last season, overall mid-range shots, Anthony Edwards attempted 38% of his shots from the mid-range. This season, he's only attempting 30% of his shots from the mid-range. Don't miss that. He's not shooting more mid-range jumpers. Now, it doesn't mean he should shoot more of them, and I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. Or yeah, I guess what I mean by that here in a second. Now, three-point attempts, this shouldn't be a surprise at all. Last season, Anthony Edwards shot 30% of his shot attempts were from three. This season, 48% of his shot attempts are coming from outside the arc, nearly half of his shot attempts. And then again, of his twos, 30% of his overall shots are mid-range, 23% are at the rim. So, what's my gripe with the mid-range shots? Well, here it is. I'm not saying Anthony Edwards should shoot less threes. Don't miss this. I'm not saying get off my lawn, get to the basket, and don't shoot threes. That's not what I'm saying. Dude's making 43% on 10.5 threes per game. It's absolutely insane. What I'm saying is, and he should take the ball to the basket more. What I'm saying is he should shoot even less mid-range jumpers. The mid-range jumper for Anthony Edwards should really only be used as a break glass in case of emergency. And I mean that. He can shoot the Kobe turnaround. He can shoot the Kevin Garnett turnaround. He can shoot the late clock. We saw this late in the loss the other night to the Warriors where Ant missed, 4 or 5 shots in the fourth quarter that were like basically right underneath the free throw line. They were tough shots. Rising up over the defense, a lot of times it's a double team. They're sending 2 at the ball. He's still getting into the paint and shooting a makeable shot, albeit a tough one. He just missed them all on Friday. He's capable of making those shots. He did make a couple in that game. But it's still the absolute worst shot he could take when he's shooting 43% on volume from threes, and he's still as athletic and big and strong and has the touch that he does at the rim. My point is, in no world should he be shooting less than a quarter of his attempts at the rim. In no world. Anthony Edwards should be, like last year's shot distribution, it was not perfect because he shot 38% of his shots from the mid-range. If he could continue to shoot 48% of his shots from three, but maintain that 31% at the rim that he shot last year, then he's shooting only roughly 20% of his shots from the mid-range. That's all. Like, I know that I'm trying to have it both ways here, but that's because I'm trying to get Anthony Edwards from a superstar to a true super duper star that can carry this team and be a top 3 player in the league. And I mean that as far as him being a top 3 player. If he cleans up some of this efficiency stuff, and we keep talking about some consistency defensively, that's still the case. That's the level he could be at. So last year's rim frequency of 31%, this year's 3-point percentage of 48%. Marry the two, that's 79% of your shots. Take her, give or take around 20% of his shots coming from the mid-range. That's palatable. He's a good enough mid-range jump shooter and an effective enough, and he's going to find himself in late clock situations because he's going to have the grenade more often than not if he's on the floor. Like, he's going to have the ball in his hands. He might need to take a tough mid-range shot from, now and again. If 1 out of every 5 shots is a mid-ranger, it's not the end of the world. But right now, it's 30%. It's essentially 1 in 3, which is a little bit too much. He should not be shooting more mid-range jumpers than attempts at the rim. And I want to talk about the effect that's had on his free throw rate. And then later in the show, we'll get into the effect, not just Ant, but the overall impact to the Timberwolves shot selection as a team and why that's holding down an offense that at times has been impressive this year and I think is ahead of where I expected them to be. But what some of those issues are, we'll get into that here in a little bit as well. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Bengals-Cowboys on Monday night was kind of, I think, what everybody expected. Maybe a few more offensive fireworks from the Bengals. Maybe should have been a surprise. There's been some good NFL games recently, and I'm actually looking forward to Rams at 49ers on Thursday night. I believe that when I did this show yesterday, that line was bigger. I think it opened with a bigger line in favor of the 49ers. It's down to just -2.5 for San Francisco. I kind of think I would still take Rams plus 2.5. The Rams are playing better. They're getting healthier. The 49ers have injuries. I don't hate Rams plus 2.5 for Thursday Night Football. You can visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase the 3-month plan, they mean it. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about Ant's shot selection. So we talked about trimming back the mid-range, but not, but assigning some of those shots to, or the majority of those shots, as many of those shots as we can to attempts at the rim. And here's why. Anthony Edwards right now, his free throw rate, or let's look at this. So free throw rate's that quick and dirty, easy way to look at this. Basketball Reference has a free throw rate statistic that I like to pull, when I'm doing post-game pods and stuff like that. There is a number over at Cleaning the Glass. They have a couple different things. They have shooting fouled percentage. So what percentage of a player's shot attempts was he fouled on, which is free throw rate, essentially. Floor fouled percentage. How many non-shooting fouls does the player draw? And then one percentage. What percentage of shooting fouls drawn did the player also make the shot? Okay. So like, for instance, Rudy Gobert's is unbelievable because, guys, if Gobert's going to shoot it, it's a dunk, basically. Although he shot a little bit more outside the paint this year than he typically has. He shot that weird, like, long mid-range jumper in the Warriors game on Sunday, which was very strange. But then also his floor fouled percentage is very high too, because teams are trying to wrap him up. Teams still have in their head that he's a bad free throw shooter, even though he's 80% this year. And so he gets fouled more often. The N1 percentage, Rudy's isn't very good because a lot of times guys like fully wrap him up when he's going to shoot. It should be higher because he gets fouled basically every time he catches a lob and dunks it, but it very rarely gets the calls. So looking at last year, I was looking at last year. Well, no, it's about the same for Rudy this year anyway. Anthony Edwards has a free throw rate, or he's fouled. Last year he was fouled on 14% of his shot attempts. which was besides Rudy the highest on the Wolves, and it wasn't particularly close. Well, actually, I take that back. Cat, I guess, last year was a little over 13%, and actually so was Kyle Anderson, which is surprising. But Ant's last year was 97th percentile, 14% rate. This year, he's only 10.6% shots fouled percentage. So only 1 in 10 times when Ant's shooting is he getting fouled. Why is that? Well, the obvious answer is because half of his shots are three-pointers, right? But you know where else you're not getting fouled is when you're shooting mid-range jumpers. You're nearly equally as unlikely to get fouled. So if he's only shooting, what did I say before? 23% of his shot attempts are coming at the rim. Of course he's going to be shooting less free throws this year. And he is. His rim or his free throw attempt rate again is or his shots fouled percentage is just over 10%. How often is he fouled while he's on the floor? Not very often. Guys don't want him to shoot free throws because he's a good free throw shooter. His and one percentage is fine, kind of in line with where it was last year. So this season, Anthony Edwards is shooting 4.4 free throws per game, which is a cleaner, maybe not cleaner, easier way to look at this, a more digestible way to look at this. He hasn't shot that few free throws per game unless you go back to the 21-22 season. 2 years ago, Ant was attempting over 5 free throws per game. Last year, he was nearly 6.5 free throws per game. Percentage-wise, he started this year really struggling, but he's up over 81%, which is second best of his career next to last season. So, moral of the story, he's getting to the line less often because he's getting to the rim less often. He's making free throws at a clip consistent or actually a little bit better than his career average. So, I guess what I said in my preseason preview, I mean, when I went on Locked On Fantasy back in mid-August with Josh Lloyd, I said if Ant can shoot more threes, if he took 1 to 2 mid-range shots and made them threes and 1 to 2 mid-range shots and made them rim attempts, he'd be pushing 30 points a game this year with efficiency. And he's about halfway to what I predicted. Instead of taking, a total of, what did I say? I think I said 1.5 to 2 to either direction, right? 1.5 to 2 to the rim. Well, he took all 4 of those and put him to the 3-point line. And is shooting literally almost exactly 4 more threes per game. And at a 7% higher clip from outside the arc. And sure enough, his point per game average is up by a half point. He's up to basically 26.5 points per game with efficiency. Now all he's got to do is take another 1 to 2 of those mid-range shots and apply them at the rim to up the free throw attempts per game. The other benefit to shooting at the rim isn't just the free throw attempts per game. It's that you're shooting at the rim. So you're going to make a high percentage of those shots. Instead, he's getting less of those generally easier shots, and he's shooting 2 less free throw attempts per game than he did last year. But his point per game average is still up a half point because of his proficiency from outside the arc. His effective field goal percentage is over 56%. Remember, effective field goal percentage factors in 3-point attempts. His previous career best was 52.8%. That was 2 years ago. He's over 56%, 56.3%. So 3.5 points better than his previous career best effective field goal percentage. His true shooting percentage, which also free throws, is nearly 60%, 59.5%, because he's shooting the ball well from the line as well, despite having a career low free throw rate. I mentioned the per game free throw averages. The benefit of free throw rate is it takes into account the volume of shots he's getting up now with a higher usage rate. And sure enough, he's got a lower free throw rate than he's had at any other point in his career, which is notable. So when you look at Ant's game, the usage rate's actually down a little bit. The assist rate's down a little bit. And the turnover rate's up. Ant just has to put his head down and get to the rim a little bit more often. Keep shooting 10 plus threes a game. Just keep doing it. But instead of the mid-range turnaround Kobe shots, get to the basket. Get fouled. Now, I want to talk about the team's shot profile here in a minute because that factors in here too. The teammates aren't identical to what they were last year. Not having Karl-Anthony Towns matters here too. The team as a whole isn't shooting the basketball at the rim as much as they did last season. And I want to dig into that. And I don't want to underestimate the shift in personnel also potentially impacting certainly the spacing on the floor, but also how Anthony Edwards chooses to attack and is able to go about attacking. But I'll finish this portion of the podcast by really where I started, which is Ant's overall efficiency. What he's doing offensively is very similar, if not a little bit better overall than what it was last year. The slippage in assist rate and the slippage in free throw rate is simply because he's just jacking up more threes, which is overall a good thing. Now, can we have it both ways? Can he trim out some of those mid-range shots and get all the way to the basket, or get there and kick it out to an open shooter, dump it off to Rudy, or throw a lob to Rudy, or whatever the case might be, instead of insisting on shooting those really difficult mid-range shots? Now, I understand I'm nitpicking. Ant's been fantastic. He's had an all-star caliber first 23 games. Yes, there's no question. But what could take him from a top 8 or 9 player to a top 3 or 4 player? And I think the answer is get to the line more often. Get to the rim a little bit more often. And then organically from that, you'll create for your teammates more as well. You see the assist rate climb too. And it obviously all works together kind of in concert. All right. I want to talk about the team shot profile in Ant is part of this too, but more broadly, looking at what the Wolves team shot profile looks like this season compared to where we saw it last season. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks is the best way to go about it. Their curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Whatever live events you like to go to, they've got them all there. Plus, you can toggle the all-in pricing feature on, which will allow you to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. It's definitely the best way to shop on Game Time. And their panoramic seat views allow you to see the view from your seat in the app before you buy. And their lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk about this team shot profile. One of my favorite tools when it comes to this is over at Cleaning the Glass. And I talked about this a bunch last year, and I didn't want to dig in too quickly this year on this number because frankly, I just wanted a larger sample size. Now that we're a quarter of the way through the season, let's do it. It's the location effective field goal percentage. So the definition of that is if a team shot the league average field goal percentage from each location on the floor, what would their effective field goal percentage be? So in other words, it factors in short, like basically the difference between twos and threes is the most important thing, but also it factors in the quality of the 2-point shots. The closer to the basket it is, or threes are going to help you, right? Like long twos and mid-range twos, mid twos. Those aren't as valuable as rim attempts, short mid-range shots, or 3-point shots, right? So last season, the Timberwolves' location effective field goal percentage was consistently higher than their actual effective field goal percentage because they struggled with above the break threes. Now, ultimately, last season, the Timberwolves, let me rephrase that. They didn't struggle with above the break threes. They did, I guess, to start the season. They finished the season shooting really hot. Cat missed a month, but they actually shot the ball well in Cat's absence. They ended up with the overall number 1 3-point shooting percentage in the league. But for as many rim shots as they got off, they didn't shoot the ball all that great at the rim either. All that to say, last season, they were 8th in location effective field goal percentage, 10th in actual field goal percentage. Now, there's teams that had a much greater gap than that, right? Like San Antonio and Memphis, who both analytically took good shots, but couldn't make shots because they had bad teams last year, right? The injured Memphis team, the rookie Wemby, no Chris Paul Spurs team. Those teams did not shoot the basketball well. The Timberwolves, again, 8th in location effective field goal percentage and 10th in actual effective field goal percentage. The only teams that had a better in both areas last season offensively were the Lakers and the Pacers. Pacers, of course, had an absurd offense last season. This year so far, the Timberwolves are only 12th in location effective field goal percentage, and they're 13th in actual effective field goal percentage. Now, the reason for this is because they're still shooting a ton of threes. They're 4th in the league in three-point rate. They're 4th in non-corner threes, so above the break threes, and they're 5th in corner three-point rate. 2-point shots. They're only 25th in the league in rim percentage frequency. Only 30.3% of the Timberwolves shot attempts this year are coming at the rim. Denver's number one at 39.5%. League average is nearly 33%, and the Wolves are 2.5 points behind league average in terms of frequency of shooting the basketball at the rim. Okay, that's a shot profile problem. We'll talk about accuracy here in a minute, but I want to touch on the biggest differences. Last season, the Timberwolves had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in their rotation that were shooting at least a fifth of their shots at the rim. So at least 20% of their shots at the rim. What did I say? 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 players. This season, the Timberwolves only have 7 last year, if you include Rudy Gobert. That's an obvious one, but we'll give it. So 7 last year. This year, the Wolves only have 1, 2, 3, 4 players shooting over 20% of their shots at the rim. So 3 less players than last year. Last year, Cat was part of that group, of course. He was actually second on the team. He still shot a higher percentage of his shots at the rim last year than Ant did. Rudy was number 1, Cat was 2, then Ant, then Jaden McDaniels, then Jordan McLaughlin, Reid, 21% of his shots last year at the rim, and then Shake Milton, believe it or not. So I'm including Shake's 38 games, right? He was part of the rotation for the first half of the season. This year, the only players over 20% from the field, 20% of their shots at the rim, Rudy. I'm not including Minot or Dillingham because they've each only played in 11 games, but early returns are those dudes are getting to the rim if they get an opportunity. Jaden McDaniels again, Julius Randle, who's actually almost at the same rate as Cat, or right around a quarter of his shots, and Reid just barely over 20%. So Ant has fallen out of that group. There's no more Jordan McLaughlin. There's no more Shake Milton. And there's no more Karl. Well, I guess Cat gets replaced by Randle in this scenario. By the way, Kyle Anderson was close. He was at 19% of his shots last year at the rim. And there's nobody else above 15%. Ant's under 15% of his shots at the rim. Remember, what did I say? 14% on the cleaning the glass number. That's kind of crazy. Ant went from that 23% number last year to 14%. And, no Kyle Anderson at 19%. No Shake. No Jordan McLaughlin. And Naz isn't, he's close, but he's not quite at the frequency of shooting at the rim as he was last year. And Randle's not as frequent as Karl-Anthony Towns. That's the big, the personnel change is a big one. And also not having Karl-Anthony Towns, that matters too. There's just less space. And it was one of my initial concerns with this trade. Karl-Anthony Towns did a lot of things. And also he put pressure on the rim with his decisiveness and when he put the ball on the floor. Naz put the ball on the floor more last year than we're seeing this year. It's really been up to Ant and any lobs that are able to get to Rudy Gobert. And Jaden will, a lot of those like weird floaters he shoots are near the rim, and he occasionally will get all the way to the rim as we see here in these numbers. So, credit Jaden for doing a little bit of that. He could do more of it. So the frequency of their attempts at the rim is dragging down not only their overall field goal percentage and points scored, because again, shots at the rim, first and foremost, are shots at the rim. They're not just shooting them to get fouled, although that's the second piece of it, right? The more shots you shoot at the rim, the more free throws you're going to shoot as a team. And that's another area, as we've talked about here on the show, that this team just has to improve on. If they want to have a more effective and efficient offense, they have to get to the rim and get fouled a little bit more often. They're 16th in the league right now in free throw rate as an offense. 16th in the league in free throw rate as an offense. Last season, the Timberwolves finished 8th in the league in free throw rate as an offense. They're shooting about 1.5 less free throw attempts the free throw rate, which is effectively the same thing. 1.5 less points per or attempts per 100 field goals. They're just not getting to the rim as often. That's the biggest issue. Now, in terms of accuracy at the rim, I care less about that because I believe it is a little bit more fluky. It's fine. It's 11th in the league, 67.5%. That's good. They're shooting the three well. By the way, this is also potentially a little bit fluky, but something to keep an eye on. The Wolves are 4th in above the break 3-point percentage. They're only 27th in corner 3-point percentage. League average is about 39% from the corners. The Wolves are just over 34% for the corners. They're, I guess it's more like 4.5 points below the league average. Is that a real thing or is it fluky? Not something I'm going to dig into yet because I think it's still too early. But like Mike Conley, that's one where he's going to get more of those attempts. He started to shoot the ball better lately, but he'll shoot the ball better from the corners. Randle, I think after what he did with the Knicks last year from the corners, they expect him to be better from the corners. So something else to keep an eye on here, shot selection wise, is can they make their corner threes? Also something that matters more in terms of individual matchups, right? Our teams giving up, or certain defenses giving up more corner 3-point looks. It's that much more important you make those shots against those teams, right? All that to say, Ant has to get to the rim more often. The Timberwolves as a team have to attempt more shots at the rim. And I'm not saying force the ball to Rudy, but there are other ways to do it. We've seen less Conley to Rudy lobs. We've seen, Kyle Anderson got pretty good at that at some point. It's just that the chemistry between Randle and Rudy isn't what it was between Cat and Rudy, which is actually a perfect segue into what I want to talk about tomorrow, which is the big man pairings. We'll dig into some lineup data. Also looking to line up a guest for Friday to talk a bit more bigger picture Wolves things and then get us ready for Wolves Lakers on Friday night. So that's what's upcoming here the rest of the week. That's all I got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You could also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And of course, you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder about the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.